Mark Rogers TV knocking out positional units across the country. We stop in the ACC at Boston College. Of course, we got to bring in Dan Rubin to talk from BC Interruption on the Eagles. And Dan, I stay true to my word when I say I'm knocking out positions, when I even go to the depths of wide receiver at Boston College. So that says a lot right there.
They have wide receivers. They wear uniforms and everything. We're not really sure what they do, but they wear uniforms. They're on the sideline. They're in practice. And if last year was any indication, they can expect to do more of sitting on the sidelines and hoping that they don't get their number called.
Okay, here's the deal, Dan. We would like for you to find somebody that, based on what you've seen, based on what you've read, scouting reports, anything that you feel could break out as a number one guy that he doesn't have to be a burner, doesn't have to be dynamic and all-American, anything like that, but somebody that you're going to feel good about trusting in some key situations coming up.
Well, ironically enough, the guy who I'm going to pick is probably going to be one of them is going to be Jeff Smith, who was a quarterback last year. So it's well publicized. The quarterback position in the offensive mindset at Boston College is totally different this year. They're switching to a pro-style offense. They got a new quarterback, new offensive coordinator. They have a guy who can throw the ball in Patrick Tolles, who's now a fifth-year senior, transfer from Kentucky, pro-style quarterback. Scott Loeffler, pro-style offense. So the passing game is not going to be any more of that option, rinky-dink stuff that we saw over the last couple of years. When I say the rinky-dink stuff, last year it started with Jeff Smith, who was a quarterback who could not complete a 7-yard pass. I mean, he was recruited as an athlete. He was small. He was an undersized quarterback. He had blazing speed, not much else. Could not throw the ball with any type of regularity. They converted him to wide receiver in the offseason. He apparently during the spring had really good repertoire, developed a good chemistry with Patrick Tolles. So I'm really interested to see if they can use him creatively and get him out into the formation. Maybe make him a possession underneath receiver and use him in some of those jet sweeps and fly sweeps that Scott Loeffler is well known for out of Virginia Tech. Outside of that, you have a couple guys. Ben Glines, redshirt freshman. He redshirted last year. He's another guy, possession type receiver, a little smaller. He's bigger height-wise. He's 6'2", but he's only 209 pounds. He's a guy out of Cincinnati, Ohio, a guy who's going to like to go underneath, a guy who's going to love getting hit and picking up those possession type passes if you're throwing to him. And if you're spreading it out on the sidelines, you got to have bigger targets. They have them. BC has bigger targets. They have Chris Garrison, who was supposed to be a number one receiver last year, but wound up hurt in the preseason, and then they chose to redshirt him. They held him out. As the season started to get away, you were kind of happy that they didn't burn the red shirt on him, gave him another year of development. He's a big dude, 6'3", 200, almost 40 pounds. So a guy who's coming in like that, you're hoping you can see him get open on the sideline and muscle through some of the DBs in the ACC.
Yeah, Garrison's a kid that was pretty highly touted coming out of that 2015 class, number 22 tight end listed in the rankings according to ESPN. You've got a couple guys here in Elijah Robinson and Charlie Callanan, if you're just looking at production from last season. So not necessarily a bunch of 80-catch guys coming back from last season, of course, Dan, but there are some guys that that caught 14 and 11 passes, Callanan with a couple touchdown receptions.
Yeah, and the one thing I liked about Charlie Callanan is that he developed into a really good blocking wide receiver. The receiving core at Boston College, that's part of what they become known for, is their ability to block downfield for running backs, which opens up different things for them, either in patterns or opens up different options for different receivers. What I feel Charlie Callanan does really well is blocks and seals off an edge, blocks off the slot defensive back, is able to block off a cornerback, which can open up another guy for a 6 or 7 yard rush. Or if you're in the passing game and you have a guy like him split out to the left or in the slot, maybe on the weak side, it creates a situation where a player can get open, collect that pass, Callanan can seal it off, and then open up another run for another 3 or 4 yards. When you have a guy like that, because he's a receiver, he also clearly can catch the football, provided the guy who's throwing it to him, A, has time, and B, can get him the football, which were both problems last year. And a guy like that, you let him muscle through a DB, cut a slant route, and go to the post and catch the pass in the end zone. So he's going to be a really interesting prospect. He's a big kid. I mean, 6'4", 240 pounds, muscular kid. He's going to be able to do some interesting things. And Elijah Robinson was a converted quarterback, and he came in and asked Boston College. He asked Steve Addazio to switch to the wide receiver position. He didn't feel he was getting the reps or necessarily get caught up to anyone who was in front of him at quarterback. So he made the switch to wide receiver. There were some major growing pains there. He had stone fingers at times last year. Another year in the system, I think he was rushed a little bit given the injuries that Boston College had, where he had to play at times last year, and he had to play with guys who weren't ready. So maybe another year of seasoning. He's not going to be an 80-catch guy. He's not going to be a burner downfield. But if he can give you 10, 15 catches and maybe a touchdown here or there, collect a key first down, that's all you can ask for out of him.
We were talking beforehand, and it appears as though you're pretty happy with the tight ends. Maybe happy is the wrong word. A little bit more optimistic based on the depth and what you've seen out of them thus far.
One of the things that I find pretty funny is that I was told last year by the play-by-play radio guy, John Meter-Perrell for Boston College. He told me on a radio program that we hosted, in a podcast that we hosted, how excited he was about the passing game prospects, about the guys who he saw in the preseason. Obviously, at the end of the season, I look back at that and I was like, boy, it's a good thing he wasn't the coach and he was just the radio guy. But he's a guy that he watched them in practice and he saw these guys develop. And one of the things that stuck out to him was the depth at the receiver position, the raw ability, which was exposed last year because, again, I keep hammering home, they were terrible. I mean, they had nobody who could catch the ball. They had nobody who could throw the ball. They had nobody who could block, except for the tight ends. The tight ends, for whatever reason at BC, didn't necessarily play poorly, and over the last couple of years have developed into a really interesting position. You'll get a converted type at tight end, a guy who maybe converts from quarterback and bulks up, or a guy who's a receiver and bulks up, and he can play an H-back position, get open over the middle for a 5 or 6 yard pass. BC didn't have that last year. They did a couple of years ago in Josh Bordner, who was a converted quarterback, and he was a guy who played the H-back, which at Florida under Steve Addazio was played by Aaron Hernandez. Pity the fact that I have to use that name. Just bust up the middle, through a hole in the line, catch a 5 yard pass, and rumble for another 4 or 5 yards. They have a guy who can do that in Tommy Sweeney, who's a sophomore, who is a large man. 6'5", 260 pounds with hands. He made a couple of catches last year. We're really high on him, myself and AJ Black. We think he's going to be very good. He's not going to be the 7 blocks of granite blocking type tight end, but they have those as well, who are guys that if they give you 2 or 3 catches on the year, that just keeps defenses honest. Guys like Michael Giacone, guys like Brendan Nosevich, who again is a converted quarterback, and a fullback in Bobby Wolford, who you're going to get those meat guys, those big meathead type guys at BC, who are just going to make their catches and rumble for 4 to 5 yards. If they can do that, it's going to open up options for Patrick Tolles.
So we got Giacone, as you mentioned. He's the blocking guy. Sweeney, a blocker as well, but a little bit more skill in the passing game. Caught 5 passes for 68 yards. I know we talked about Jake Burt, who was the 34th rated tight end coming out of that 2015 class, who caught a football last year.
Oh yeah, Jake Burt. Yeah, thanks for bringing him up. Although I do have to say he's out of St. John's Prep, so I didn't mention him because it's a St. John's Prep high school thing. I wouldn't take it personally for him.
We'll not get into your bitter high school rivalry. All right, so they're going to throw the football at Boston College this year, and they actually are moving 2 quarterbacks to wide receivers. So, Dan, we appreciate the knowledge and the breakdown. Wide receiver, Boston College. Let's complete some passes this year, Dan.
Something be better than nothing.